continuing to invest in fossil fuels. To talk to us about this, what the report reveals about greenwashing, influence and climate accountability, we're joined by Lazola Kati, climate change activist and coordinator of the Fossil Ad Ban campaign. Lazola, very good evening to you. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us.
Thank you. Good evening, Tsepi. So thank you for having me.
So your report, it tracked 200 fossil fuel advertisements in just 2 months. And just take me back in the time period. So maybe that figure has changed over time. What does it tell us just about how aggressively industry is trying to shape the climate narrative?
Yeah, so for sure, we actually launched a research perspective report. So we tracked the top 6 petroleum companies in South Africa. And this was in the year of 2024, between the months of May and June. And we tracked how much spending that they put into advertising in general. And then from there, we then had to go through looking each of the advertisements to look at how much spending is put into greenwashing and exactly where these different platforms are. So your radios, your commercial radio stations, your TVs, commercial and private TV stations. And we actually realized that in those 2 months only, those top petroleum companies like your BPs, your Total, Shell, Astron, Sasol spent over 15.3 million rand on greenwashing. And I must say that this is very aggressive because there have been multiple studies that have been released in the psychology department and through academic research on greenwashing that does state that an exposure of about 30 seconds of a normal consumer to greenwashing actually changes the perspective of the consumer to make them feel positive about fossil fuel companies or whatever product that they're putting out. So this is the amount of money that was spent on just 30-second exposure of an advertisement to buy social licensing to continue fossil fuel expansion. So I would say that this project of greenwashing is extremely aggressive, and all of these fossil fuel companies are perpetuating it, and they're pushing a lot of funds into it as well.
And which sectors are most impacted by this concept of greenwashing?
It is actually all sectors, if I'm going to be honest, so because when the reason greenwashing exists is to ensure that there is social licensing, there is consumer buy-in, there is policy buy-in, there is human buy-in into fossil fuel expansion, regardless of the fact that fossil fuel expansion, the continued extractivist nature of oil, gas, petroleum is harming the environment and human beings and the labor sector. Right? And when I say the labor sector, is that a lot of these projects that come into different African countries, and I'll speak about South Africa, the biggest promise is always development. And this is another aspect of greenwashing. Communities and countries and policy leaders are promised development, and development in terms of jobs and employment. This is what we are told by our government every single time in South Africa. But what actually happens on the ground is that fossil fuel companies come and open mines, they take a couple of the men and young boys, they go shovel coal, they go shovel all types of chemicals. There are no engineers that are hired. There are no marketing executives that are hired, no writers, none of these professionals. It's cleaners and shoveling coal. And that is basically what we are worth to fossil fuel companies.
And what basically it is in layman's term is a PR exercise for these big companies like, I'll mention them, Sasol, Shell, BP, and Total Energies. Am I correct?
100%. That's what it is. That is by definition what greenwashing is. It is a tactic. It's a PR tactic. It's an advertising tactic. It is an old tactic dating back to the Cold War. It's not new at all.
So I want to look at the agriculture sector because I'm looking at smallholder farmers and particularly women farmers. Yesterday we spoke about, applying a gendered lens when we're looking at these financial mechanisms that will help Africa in its recovery with regards to climate action, climate change. how much do policy makers pay attention to that? Because obviously they must be aware, as in any business, this is part of what you invest in, right? PR, advertising, marketing, so that you can greenwash whatever projects you have. So systemically, you remain the same as long as you're making profits.
Yes. So the truth of the matter is there's very little investment going into small scale farmers, very little investment, even less going to women that are in the farming sector, small or big scale. The idea here that has been sold, and it has been successfully sold, is the idea of development. And I'll go a step further to say I am saying it is successful because we have our Minister of Natural Resources in South Africa, Minister Gwede coming out and saying specifically that anyone that's speaking on the environment being harmed, that's speaking against these fossil fuel expansion projects, is anti-progression and anti-development. That is when you see the progress, or rather the success of the greenwashing project. And the focus is consistently on fossil fuel expansions. The majority of even public funds are invested into fossil fuel expansion projects. That is South Africa. The majority of investments that we have that bring in interest into the country is consistently fossil fuel expansions. Currently, we're sitting in a situation where over 90% of the coastal areas where women and communities depend on the biodiversity for subsistence farming and also for economic development is leased out for fossil fuel expansion. And this is including your farms as well.
And
it is the same situation.
I want us to end with a clanger, so to speak, a mic drop. Let's end then with the concept of green grabbing.
Yes, 100%. It is the new scramble for Africa. It is green grabbing.
So tell us a little bit more about that. Educate our audience.
Yes. So what we have seen happen as the fossil ad ban campaign, we went into different communities and we started speaking to communities because there is the greenwashing project that's happening in terms of PR and advertisements, but we need to look at the impact on the ground, right? So we started noticing that, for one, there is less access for your small scale farmers and even your small scale fishing communities. There's less and less land that is offered to these people because of fossil fuel expansion. So when I talk about the coastal area, there's a good example where you find in a community, and this is in Saldanha Bay. At first, it's over 50 boats that are allowed to fish in a specific area. This is a representative of the community. They can put 50 boats. But because of fossil fuel expansion and certain aspects for a fossil fuel, specifically gas, which is now named a transitional fuel, you find instead of 50, they say only 5 boats are allowed. Now tell me, in a fishing community, who is going to be on the dock fishing when it's from 50 to 5 boats? This is the reduction we're seeing. And it's the same with farms. We went all the way to Mpumalanga, which has been named the global CO2 hotspot emitter, right? It is the most polluted place on planet Earth. And this same thing is happening. We have women that are losing land, access to land. There's lack of retention in terms of land for women, for farmers, for communities. We have a community called Ekwazuka there that was moved from a place where they were actually living to a different place, and the mine then took over and started mining in the area.
Right.
And what is interesting, Tepi, so we have on our website, is that now that community is living on barren land. Nothing grows there. The cattle is dying. The grass is dying. The community is then what? Suffering.
Lazola.
And due to mining activities, the houses are also now in a difficult state.
Lazola, I appreciate how passionate you are about this, and certainly we are going to speak to you again. And I thank you for the education and expanding on some of these concepts that maybe we understand at an elementary level, and just delving deeper into the facts on the ground, the studies that you've done,